Welcome to our interview workshop. We've done some resume workshops in the past, and we thought we'd do one on interviewing now and take all of your questions about anything you want to know about interviewing and anything that you're struggling with. So we have some topics we'll go through first. Kyle Brummans, who is a recruiter here at Impact, along with Amanda Quirk, who's with Monster.com, will do the presentation for you. So I'm just doing a quick introduction. These are the topics we'll talk about today. So Kyle, do you want to kick everybody off?
Yeah, so a little bit about Impact Business Group is what we're going to kind of hit off with, and then we'll go over Monster.com as well. I'm sure a lot of the people on this presentation have a little bit of knowledge about us, either exploring just beforehand or known about us for quite some time. We'll get into the interview process, what that looks like, what it can look like, different ways it can go, and then kind of what it looks like to get prepared for an interview. Part of that preparation is just, how do you present yourself best, which is one of the bullet points there. And then just kind of following up with how that interview looked. All those different pieces can cause a lot of different emotions and stuff like that. But when we process that, we got to look back at, all the different signs that the interview went well. What the next steps look like, how to engage the person that's interviewing with you, so that you can get to that next step. Quick 30-minute introductory interview is great, but how do I, get beyond that? Are you getting stuck at that stage? What does it take to get to the next stage? And then after that, we'll review some of the different questions that everybody's got and open up to a Q&A. All right. And so, yeah, a little bit about Impact Business Group, founded in 2004. Our flagship site here is in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And then we also have a site down in Tampa, Florida, but we're serving clients nationwide. Got a pretty solid footprint in 27 different states, but we're touching a lot of them. Just continuing to develop those relationships and expanding our network. Core areas of our group are information technology, so that's like software, IT, developers, front end, back end, and everybody like that, project management. Into engineering and operations, the core part of manufacturing. Of course, all these areas have areas where they overlap, but that goes down to the tech level. Anyone in that quality technician, maintenance technician, robotics technician, all those supporting fields in the organization, all the way up to operations manager, and then into like presidents and everybody like that. Accounting, finance, controllers. I know we got a controller that signed in earlier. We were just chatting with Don and the different finance sectors, forecasting and stuff like that. And then really just about anywhere else that kind of touches in those areas and in those sectors: administrative work, human resources work, marketing, and different roles that we are touching on: a permanent contract to hire, all those different sectors. Remote is a little bit less frequent nowadays, but we still get a lot of different remote roles, hybrid roles, and then of course the on-site.
All right. And so I work for Monster.com. Monster is a global leader in connecting people with jobs. Monster works very closely with employers to attract the right type of candidates for the right fit. So we spend a lot of time, if you go out to Monster.com, we spend a lot of time curating content that helps candidates and allows them to find the right job. So if you actually go out to Monster.com and you go to our career advice section, you're going to see a lot of interview information out there. Jeremiah actually earlier said that it's been, and what would you say, 15 years, right? Since you went and joined
15,
yeah. So Monster 25 years ago started the job board industry and completely flipped recruiting upside down and started it in digital. Fun fact: Monster was the 454th website ever created back in 1994. So we've had a lot of experience connecting candidates to active opportunities.
All right. Yeah. So, and just like how Amanda left off there, connecting, the purpose of a job interview is to connect you, with somebody that ultimately what they need is help. A lot of people get a little inundated with the idea of an interview, and just a quick thought out there is to treat everything kind of like a conversation. The purpose here is to connect, talent with an opportunity, and to, bridge that gap from understanding, what you have to offer and what the company's for. And so you're just kind of trying to find a mesh between the two worlds. A lot of people are coming from one industry and moving into another. And even with that, there's a lot of overlap that happens in there. We see people go from, for example, automotive manufacturing into medical manufacturing and various things like that. And it's how do we bridge that gap? What pieces make sense to talk about? How do you frame up your experience and how that translates into experience in other roles? With today's world, we've gone very digital, like Amanda was saying, and Monster's leading the way with that. As number 454, that was a fun fact. The different types of interviews out there, phone, video, in person. What do you usually see the most of, Amanda? I feel like we're starting with a lot of like phone interviews as kind of the first initial step. Are you kind of feeling the same way?
Yeah, I would say a lot starts with well, there's also, so it starts probably with email and outreach, right? And then it's followed up by phone, and videos becoming way more prevalent. I would say a couple years, prior to the pandemic, it was mostly, there was a lot of in person. So we're seeing more and more video now, but I agree that they do start phone. They will also go to video, and then in person is still happening. It's just, I feel like the other two are where you start first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that kind of good point there too, with that engagement in the process too, right? As you start your interviewing process, that first part of engagement, emails, text. Text is becoming more prevalent, but if you're serious in the market, staying on top of that initial engagement. If somebody's texting you, text them actively and try to show that interest is there, as we're all kind of trying to explore the market, and then preparing for those different interview formats we'll get into here. All right. So yeah, I guess those different interview formats, of course, there's the pieces here with researching the company and the role. What are you applying for? What does the company do? Where do you see yourself fitting, and also being able to speak knowledgeable about the company. But before a little bit of that too is also understanding what does that interview look like? Is it a phone interview? Are we texting? How professional do I need to be in text message? How professional do I need to be on the phone? What do all these different steps look like? For texting back and forth and email, the main goal there is communication. Let's try to line up a time to talk is ultimately what we're trying to do. You're not going to have a job interview through text. So the main goal there is to just have good, efficient communication, and that is definitely a step forward in the interviewing process. If it is difficult to get a hold of you, if it is difficult to get the next steps arranged, one that's also making that next step difficult for you. So I mean, you're moving away from the opportunity, and other candidates are moving into the opportunity. So you want to stay on top of what those communications look like, and then ultimately know, as you're preparing for the interview here, what exactly you're going to be interviewing for. So if that's the phone interview, the Zoom interview, etc. It'd be a little bit hard to do a video interview in your car, for example.
Yeah, so to add to that a little bit, like I think that depending on the type of role, and I'm speaking very, very generally here, but speed to response matters for both the recruiter and for the candidate. Just because, time to fill a job, it varies greatly by industry. So there are some roles that are that are filled rather quickly. And then I would say some of the other technical roles could have a 45-day to fill. So it depends on, it depends on the type of opportunity that you're pursuing, but if you can respond and get the initial interview set up, you're going to be ready for the next steps that when we talk about here, right? Preparing and how do you prepare. But just trying to secure the time is going to be really, really helpful for both you and the recruiter.
Yeah, absolutely. And securing that time and also making sure everybody knows that that time is respected and valued too, right? And just kind of nice to see everybody, joining in on this and respecting the time and being part of this. It's just kind of a give and take between the relationships, right? You want the feedback from the recruiter or the place where you're interviewing with, as much as they're looking for that feedback from you and having that communication. So yeah, we touched on researching the company and the role, and that kind of touches on what Amanda was saying there too with how soon are they looking to fill it? Those are good questions to have, in that process. And one of the things that I like to have candidates do is jot down questions like that, questions that are important to you on a piece of paper, showing that preparedness for the interview and for yourself. Last thing we want to do is get into the last stages of an interview and you realize,
Sure.
oh, sorry, what's that?
If you guys are unmuted out there, if you can hit your mute button.
But do feel free to chime in if you have a question, as we're kind of going through this, or a quick thought, and Mark will jot it down and we can hit that in the Q&A too. Yeah,
So for researching a company, there's several things that you can do, right? That go beyond just looking at the company's career site. So if you know the end company, right, are they publicly traded? If they are a publicly traded company, the Yahoo Finance page is fantastic. It's a great resource because it's going to give you, financial information, but it's also going to give you news articles in one spot. So I really love using Yahoo for researching companies. There's other sites you can use. You can read profiles on Monster. You can read profiles on Glassdoor. You can go to social media pages. What I like about social media pages is because you can get like a behind the scenes look at a company's culture, which will help you a little bit later on. So just don't just read their company website, but go and find other news articles if you can, to see if you can find additional information. You can also, a lot of larger companies at least will have information about their executive team and their background. So don't be afraid to read some of those profiles on the career site and even maybe on LinkedIn and some of those other platforms. There is so much information out there that expands just past the company's career site.
Amanda, a quick question maybe that we can answer later would be when we're doing the research, social media, LinkedIn in particular, is it good practice to connect with individuals within the company that are in the same department that you're applying for, or is that sort of taboo?
I think that expanding your network is super important. And if, the nature of like LinkedIn, if somebody is uncomfortable accepting the request, they don't have to. So I don't think that that's inappropriate. I think even if you're interviewing with people, it's important to connect with them through LinkedIn to grow your network. I think what ends up happening more naturally is once you're at the company, that's when you'll really start to get a larger network. But it's not inappropriate to reach out to anybody on social media if you have interests.
Mm-hmm. And I'll put another perspective in there too. If you're actively in an interview process, and that's whether it's with a recruiter or not, but whoever your point of contact to kind of start that process off, keying them into what kind of communications are going on is always good. We can kind of like steer some certain communications. Like if you have questions on, is this a good idea or is this a bad idea? You know, we've got perspective on that we can kind of clue you into. And like, I guess like one area where I would think maybe don't venture outward would be if you're in the interview process, you're waiting for feedback, you haven't gotten it, and then reaching out to, almost overextending yourself into the network in that fashion. I don't know that would necessarily be appropriate or inappropriate. It's something that would probably be evaluated on a case-by-case basis, right? If you're in an interview process and you're expecting feedback and then, various things. I mean, anything can happen. People can go on maternity leave in the middle of interviews. All sorts of different life events happen. So all of those things are a case-by-case basis when you're in process like that. And so it's always good to try to reach out to that initial point of contact. That's definitely something that, from a recruitment standpoint, something that we're able to help navigate with and kind of guide through.
Yeah, and I think we'll touch upon it a little bit more about the steps that are actually, recommended, such as after your interview. And I know I'm skipping ahead a little bit here, but after your interview, it's actually helpful to send a follow-up and a thank you email for the time. So you will still be connecting with people, but perhaps a little more direct. So, but we'll get to that. So I jumped ahead a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's see, Mark, did you want to just pop back once, actually? Sorry about that. Yeah, so we'll kind of tie through this one quickly here, but understanding the job requirements. When you're in an interview, and let's just go ahead and assume that you're in your interview, the best way, from my perspective, I mean, hopefully you've done your due diligence and you've read the job description, you know what you're applying for, those pieces. But ultimately, the person that's hiring for the job is the person that knows what the job requirements are. They know what their pain points are. And so the best thing that I like people to do is ask, hey, where do you guys need help? What is going to make me successful in this position from your perspective? And you're putting a frame in their court for them to kind of fill out for you and say, this is, I really need somebody that knows people. Okay. And you can draw back to your experience and say, okay, well, this is an area where I've done this, and you can take that from your experience and apply that directly to one of their pain points, one of the things that they need, so asking in the interview, hey, what do you need help with? Is probably the simplest way to turn what people feel as an interview into a conversation. And ultimately that's our goal, is to pivot into a conversation, make it feel casual. Not casual in the sense that you're, just kind of there or anything like that, but casual in the sense of like you're there for them and you're trying to figure out how to help. And then, analyzing the industry and any competitors, it depends on what kind of role you're applying for. When you kind of touch on that bullet point there, if we're talking about sales, then that's very important to understand what the industry and competition looks like. If it's more on a say it's this aluminum extrusion plant versus this aluminum extrusion plant, and you've worked at one, and then you can kind of translate that industry from a competitor over there, and that can be appealing. But it just kind of depends on the role that you're applying for there. And then I touched on this a little bit there too, but having a list of questions, so creating impactful questions for the interviewer. Find things that are interesting for you and kind of dive into those, and write those down on a paper to be prepared for that interview. Okay, I'm done with that one. Sorry.
No, that was good. I think other questions. So I think part of the impactful questions part is the interview is twofold, right? One is what value can you bring to the employer? And then the other part of it is, are you really a good fit for that company? And I think that it's your opportunity to ask some of those questions to make sure that you're the right fit for that role, and for that company. So just keep that in mind when you're crafting your list of questions, that it's really for both of you to learn more, you to learn more about the company and them to learn more about, how you can help move their business forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So presenting yourself, the best. And this goes back again to, are we doing a phone interview? Are we in the text message, email? Is this in person? Is it a Zoom? One of the things that we like to tell people is a lot of people interview at lunch hour, right? That's your time away from the desk. You're very committed to your job. And you're not necessarily looking to spend all your vacation time to take days off until you know that something's serious. So a lot of people are taking that lunch hour call. Well, if you're going to take a lunch hour call and you can't run home to a desk, then you're using your phone, and that phone is quite possibly like this. I mean, I'm only making it this close because that's where I'm at right now, right? But if you're doing a Zoom call, that is going right up your nose. I mean, that's what people are seeing. So we don't want to do that, right? We want to try to think about where we're putting the phone. So if you're taking it in your car, I like to tell people to put it on the steering wheel, make sure that it's not going to fall off in the middle of the interview. And you present yourself the best, right? We want to be prepared as we can be. So, if you can find a spot that's quiet, non-distracting for that lunchtime Zoom call, that's going to be the best. I don't want to be in a Burger King parking lot, that's somebody rolls in and maybe there's crying kids in the next car over and you're in the middle of an interview and now you're very distracted. We want all of our focus to be on your relationship with this prospective employer and what that's going to look like and how to best present yourself. And if you're distracted and they're distracted, they might not even get to ask the questions they wanted to ask, and you might not get to ask those questions too. So just kind of looking at, hey, is this a phone interview? Is this a Zoom interview? And some of those same steps apply for a phone interview too, right? Nice, quiet location. Car is perfect. But what parking lot are you in still? If you're somewhere where you're going to be distracted by everybody walking by and lose your train of thought, you might want to think about a different location. So a nice quiet park is a great spot. But all those details can kind of lead you to success if you follow what's going to give you the best foot forward. And then I think we're kind of more in a business casual environment for in-person interviews. How do you feel about that, Amanda?
Yeah, I think the company culture matters, and you can learn a lot by looking into what type of company you're working for. I would say business casual is default, unless you're I guess if you're looking for like higher level roles, potentially you need to be a little more business formal. So I think it depends on the actual role, but I would say default is business casual. Making sure that you're a little more professionally dressed and conservatively dressed is important, just to make sure that you're putting your best foot forward. Another thing I'll add about phone calls. So I am a huge fan of a messy bun and ripped jeans, right? Like that's just my normal, unless I know I have to be ready for a meeting. Even if I'm going to be on a phone call, I'll actually take the time and do my hair, get myself ready, and that way I'm just like mentally in the right state. So I don't think that it's even inappropriate to make sure that you're in the right state of mind for just a phone call versus a video or in-person interview. The other thing that I'll add is that I would rather be overdressed than underdressed any day of the week. So if I'm going to show up somewhere and I'm a little bit like, maybe I chose a dress instead of dress pants and a blouse, I'm going to be okay with that. I'm going to feel more confident being over prepared and overdressed than I would be, if I showed up with my messy bun and my ripped jeans, right? So, so I just think that you really got to think what is going to get you in the right mental state to be able to be professional, and how do you project yourself confidently. The other thing I'll add is make sure you wear something comfortable. High heels, I don't know how many females are on this call, but like they're torture devices, right? So maybe find a nice pair of really cute flats. They're not required. You don't have to wear heels. So I would say make sure that you're comfortable, because the other thing is if it goes well, or if it's a panel interview, I guess it depends on the company or the style, you could end up being there longer. So make sure that you're comfortable as well.
Yeah, that's a really good thought. I didn't even think about comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I am going to actually piggyback on your piggyback there on the phone interviews. One more thing too, if you're going to, try to plan your phone interview for a time when you're driving, don't. Let's not take a phone call while we're distracted and driving. Park the car, get the job. You got to take it as serious as you can, and taking the time to just, if you can't make it home before you need to do that, and by all means, don't rush home and have your mind completely distracted from the interview or any of those things. Take the time to make the time. So that you can, I guess that kind of comes back to comfort, right? So that you're not flustered, you are focused, and not driving.
They just passed a law in Michigan. You're not allowed to hold your phone and talk on the phone while you're driving anyway. So
It's
So
a hands-free Michigan.
hands-free Michigan, that option is completely out.
Yeah, Massachusetts has had that for quite some time as well. I think it's a fantastic law. You don't need to be distracted. I think there's enough pressure behind the interview as well that you don't need to add any additional stressors, right?
Absolutely.
So
Yep. And then, so showcasing confidence and enthusiasm. It doesn't matter what step of the interview that you're in. You want to be confident in the skills that you're bringing to the table. That doesn't mean that you need to overextend what your skills are. I always be transparent. I mean, we're not going to highlight that you're missing a whole bunch of skills. You can just say that you don't have them. You don't need to kind of drive that point home. What we want to do is highlight what you do have and what it looks like to work through anything that might be missing. It's always about highlighting who you are and your best foot forward. And that's where your confidence is going to be. So don't try to stretch yourself somewhere where you're not. Prepare for what makes the most sense for you. So if I'm good at this is what I'm showcasing. This is, if I'm a people person, maybe I don't quite understand KPIs in a business as well, or the technical aspects of things, but I'm really good with people. And this is a manager role. Okay, well, showcase that, show how you work with people. And then if a pain point for you is understanding KPIs, show how you're how you're addressing that yourself, like understanding those different metrics or whatever it is that you're trying to hold yourself to. But don't say that you're a master of something to get there, and then one that could ask a question just real simply and throw that out the window for you. So always being transparent about where your skills are at and highlighting where your strengths are. And that comes down to, if we go back a thought where it's, what do you need help with? You're asking them, what do they need help with? And then you're pulling from your background and showing how you fit that. And that's going to give you confidence. And then as we get to the end of whatever interview step you are, a key here is always asking, hey, what do next steps look like? I'm really excited about the opportunity. That's it right there. I'm really excited about the opportunity. Just saying I'm excited is the enthusiasm that you need. You need to let them know that you are a valid candidate. If they don't know if you're valid, if they don't know that you're interested in the role, when the interview's over, the opportunity's over. They don't know that you're interested. They don't want to feel like they're going to be trying to sell it to you at that point. They want to know that you're interested in it, because they're going to be quite possibly interviewing, say, let's say 10 people. Maybe it's 2 people. We don't know, but we want to know that you're interested in this opportunity, so that comes through and pulls through. And then if you're asking for those next steps, they might take the time to engage you in that moment right there and schedule an on-site interview, schedule the next Zoom interview. If you don't say that, they might even have intended it and forget. And that's just another way that an opportunity can escape you. So it's always showing that enthusiasm right at the end of what next steps could look like.
And then I'll add to that. So let's just say you're asked about a skill that you don't possess. You can show enthusiasm by saying, well, I don't have that. Perhaps I have, related skills, or even if you don't, you could say, I'm really excited to learn something new. I'm happy to help. I want to learn more. And I'm looking forward to being able to add that skill to my, to my my list of skills already. So there are ways that even if you don't have a specific skill, you can highlight that you're interested and engaged in learning more.
Absolutely.
And then on the nonverbal communication, just to maybe add a couple of things and you can expand on it. So just things if you're on a Zoom call with an interviewer, you want to still look in the camera like you're looking them in the eye and not look away or look down. You don't want to have your hands crossed, those kinds of things. So I don't know if Kyle, Amanda, if you can expand on that a little bit, maybe things you've seen, some advice on that side.
Yeah, I'll add so I have, it's even for me personally right now, right? I have 3 screens in front of me. I know you can't see that. And I have to pick where I put my computer. So that way, if I'm honest, my most comfortable way to sit is like this. But you guys can see the side of my face, right? And I want to present myself different. So depending on how I sit, I will, you know, where I'm at, I'll arrange my computer so that way I am directly facing a computer, like my camera. So that's a good thing. The other thing is a background. So one thing I do love, like right now I'm in my home office and you would have no idea because I have this lovely monster background behind me. So if you do not want to share your personal space with others, grab a background. There's a bunch of preset ones on most major platforms, like Zoom has it. If you're on a Teams call, Teams has it. I want to say Log Me In, Join Me In. All the major web platforms have these backgrounds that you can set that will help give you a little more of a confidence boost. It might make you look like you're in an actual office. And then yeah, and then the other thing I'll add is like I'm a fidgeter. I already know this. I'm sorry. It's just who I am. I talk with my hands a lot. And so I actually I try to like actually sit properly and try not to fidget. And sometimes if I'm going to fidget, I make sure I'm below the camera level because I know I'm a fidgeter.
Yeah, so. And this kind of goes back to your messy bun and ripped jeans comment, right? Put your computer in that spot that's forward facing, but then also let's I don't know if I can show this, right? Let's lean forward like you do when you're at a table and you're actually at an interview in person, right? Let's lean forward and have that interest in what's going on so that you feel fully engaged, and that'll come across in the camera, right? So we're leaning in and we're showing that interest level.
Yep. So quick question, is blur no good then?
I don't have a problem with your background when I look at it. I'm not seeing like anything descriptive. It looks like you're in a room and there's a corner behind you and you have posters on the wall.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I guess like my thought on blur is, what can you still tell is in the background, and what's going to take, like, is there anything that's going to distract in the background? Like if there's somebody walking through and various things like that, distractions, it's all distraction based. So, I mean, I can see you've got maybe some pictures hanging on the wall. But I like she said, I don't see anything distracting in your background. It's kind of a case by case basis. If there's going to be cats walking on the computer table, you know, and various things like that, maybe, unless you know you're interviewing with somebody that's a cat person, close the door and keep the cat out of the office. Yeah, I mean, it really depends on what's in your background and what it looks like from a blur setting, right?
Okay. So basically keep the background as, you know, as far away or as you know,
yeah,
as possible.
Neutral.
Don't use like a Detroit Lions background or anything like that. Just a straight flat background will get me through, because I was impressed with Amanda's background. I thought that was her home.
Here. So I'm gonna show you guys. Can you go into your settings? Here. That's my office. I don't mind sharing it. I just try not to. If you can see it, but if you go to settings down at the bottom, do you see that where you see participants, screen share settings? And then you'll see a background. I can choose to blur it, or I can use, is it changing live at least? I see it changing.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Oh, you're at the beach.
Not
I
the
love it.
beach, right?
I'm jealous. I want to be there right now. Northern Lights, you know. Well, and so each platform has its own, like you'll have different ones. So Teams does a bunch of Office ones. So in any case, yeah, my background's completely fake, and you wouldn't even know. Makes me happy.
Perfect. Thank you.
I prefer standing. Are there any posture considerations if you prefer to stand, or is it not even a good idea to stand for an interview?
Are you talking like a Zoom interview?
Yeah.
Okay. You know, the thing with standing, and I don't know if I can do this, but you're gonna be a little bit more bumbly, right? And we don't want to distract anyone. So if you can fix yourself on something, if you're standing, if you've got like one of those work desks or something like that, you can still talk with your hands and stuff like that. But what we don't want to do is be pacing and moving around. I mean, look at me. That's not what I want to present, right? I want to present something that's a little bit more fixed. You can still have an interested posture with that. And I would try to keep it, you know, bust up is what the focus is, you know, so that more engaging perspective. But I wouldn't want to be like bumbling and walking around in the background and kind of pacing. I just don't know what that's going to present from a focus standpoint.
Sure.
Yeah, so I would say test your camera ahead of time. So do like a test with somebody and maybe get a camera stand, or if you're using a laptop or phone, place it so that it looks good, so you can try it ahead of time before the interview, so you've prepared a little bit. And think about the lighting as well. So if you have lighting coming in, that may impact how you look on the camera. So those kinds of things, good to try ahead of time.
Yeah, actually, so I'm glad you said the light thing, because actually we tested this out before the call. I have a light that is behind my laptop because I know I'm in a darker room. So just keep that in mind.
Yep, and you can get one of those ring lights and put it in front of you, because you don't want backlight, because then it makes you look very dark if the light's coming on strongly behind you. So one of those ring lights could be helpful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, you mentioned a really good point there too. Test this out ahead of time, right? Let's not get this set up 2 seconds before the call is about to, and your chance in being late, or not seeing you completely. And what that also does is allows you to be focused. Again, it's that attention to the conversation, attention to the task at hand. I don't want to be thinking about how I just crammed into this and I made it all work. We want to be engaged in what we're doing and confident. And confidence comes with preparation, whether it's writing the questions down, getting your Zoom call set up, thinking those steps through. And ultimately the person that's more prepared, more confident, more comfortable, and that's the other piece too, is comfortable, right? We don't want to be stressing ourselves out with all these details. At a certain step, just it's good enough. But we want to have that confidence and that comfort, and we just want to be able to relax and if you can, enjoy the interview, enjoy having the conversation with somebody. Because one, you're going to be working hopefully with this person for a long time. So our goal here is just to enjoy a conversation with them, ask them how we can help, and ultimately be comfortable. So, okay. Oh, we're on to the next slide already. So interview follow-up, sending you thank you notes and emails. Absolutely. If you're working with a recruiter, I recommend sending it to your recruiter first. We just like to proofread for typos or anything like that. If you're not working with recruiter, send it to a friend or a family member that's going to pay attention to those details for you too. And the other thing too is anything in text form can be read multiple ways. I don't want you to overthink anything, but just to kind of look at it and make sure that it's coming across exactly how you mean. And then also with that, short and simple, short and sweet. They don't need a paragraph that's 1,000 characters or anything like that. Just thank you for your time, show that appreciation that's in there. You can touch on how you feel like you're a fit and various things like that. But I would avoid getting in the weeds. The person that's interviewing also doesn't have a lot of time to read a very long, possibly well thought out thing. But if we can be short, sweet, pivot on the positives with those thank you notes and emails, and then also have somebody proofread that. And I don't know.
You could also use like we use ChatGPT a lot here, so you can have ChatGPT write you a little thank you note that you can modify to have your specific details in it, but at least you get a good format.
Mhm.
And just to jump back on something real quick, we got a message from Don just to add to our preparing for doing the interview on a webcam is to test your microphone as well. So I was just throw that in there as well to one more thing to test out.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a good one. And then Kyle, I have a question for you real quick. So when you're doing your follow-up emails and you've met with multiple contacts, should you have a unique message or should you use the same one per contact? Is there a best practice?
Are you talking about like the contact within the company, like the
Yeah.
same contact? I mean, I would. It's kind of a case by case sort of self-assessment on that. If you're reaching out to multiple people with kind of a scripted email or a scripted thank you note, and it feels scripted and you don't mention anything personal, and I'm actually really glad that you brought that up. You do want to make sure that they know that you personalized this to them. I mean, that's going to come across a lot better than something that's just kind of scanned and copied and scripted. And to Mark's note, if you're struggling with an idea, using ChatGPT can help you start that idea, but absolutely dial back into that, personalize it so that they know it's coming from you. You can have it also just check for typos or any grammatical errors. There's also softwares out there that do that. But from a personal standpoint, we really want to have that that I talked with you and here's me talking with you again sort of feel. At least that's my perspective. I mean, you don't need to write a paragraph. It doesn't need to be anything long. But just out of the sense of it's almost like what you said on a phone interview. You're getting yourself ready. You're getting yourself prepared. It's the same sort of thing, right? I'm actually going to go ahead and even if I'm typing the exact same email to somebody else, I'm going to type it to them.
Yep. We got a comment here from Don suggesting, and we use this internally as well, is Grammarly. So that's another great tool to use. Kyle, maybe you can talk to another, let's say you go to an interview, you do your follow-up, and a good question to ask is when you can expect the next step. So let's say they tell you that we're going to have an answer for you by Monday next week. And let's say that Monday next week comes and goes and you haven't heard a thing. What kind of additional follow-up email or communication could you send at that point?
Yeah, so if Monday next week you haven't heard anything, I think it's okay to reach out. I mean, if you're chatting with your recruiter, if that's the avenue that you've gone, then I would follow up with your recruiter at 5 o'clock or sooner that day. I mean, I would be touching base saying, hey, I'm expecting them to follow up with you on Monday, and just keeping that conversation going. That being said, if you're working direct, I would suggest giving that a 24-hour pause, grace window, and then sending up a follow-up. Hey, I was expecting a follow-up. Just wanted to touch base and see what things look like from your perspective. Short and sweet.
So at that point, would you put something in that thank you note that would remind them, because they probably had a bunch of interviews. So would you put something in there to maybe remind them of a couple of things that maybe you hit it off on that you thought that they really appreciated about, the interview that you talked to them about?
Yeah, so and that's kind of that personalization, right? Something in there that kind of ties into you. And the only thing that I'm trying to step away from here with this is not giving them a lot to read. You want to be short, sweet, and positive. So if you talked about even a personal item, was nice chatting with you about the opportunity and hope that your kids have a good game this weekend. Something like that kind of reminds them of that conversation and triggers that memory. It doesn't need to be anything long. It can be job specific. That's fine too. But something that's positive that you both, if you think about it, you know that both of you would agree that you remember that, right? Something that you guys know that you talked about. So if you were engaged in this conversation and you talked about a very specific project, you can say, hey, I remember we were talking about that very specific IT project or that thing that you're having difficulty managing. I'd love to be part of that solution with you. Excited to see what next steps look like from your perspective. If you're sending this thank you note, after you're waiting for the follow-up there, then I would just tie something in there, again, short and simple. Hey, I was hoping to hear back. Understand things are kind of chaotic, so anytime you can reach out would be appreciated, and wanted to see what things look like from your perspective.
I would even say on the initial email, if they said, if you asked during the interview, during your question section, what are the next steps and when will I hear from you? And they say, oh, we'll have an update for you by Monday. Maybe close your email by saying, looking forward to hearing back from you next Monday or on Monday, just so they have that reminder, because sometimes that email in your inbox, when you go to clean out your inbox, it's still there and they're like, oh, got to follow up, right? So I think that it might not be a bad idea that if you can get to the, hey, what are the next steps? When can I hear from you? Just kind of reiterating that in a very simple, positive, enthusiastic way of like, I'm excited to hear from you. That might help as well.
Actually, Mark, you want to hit back once?
Oh, yep.
Sorry, there was one on there that I thought would be evaluating and learning from each interview experience. So you missed this one. That's okay. If you're working with a recruiter, you can ask them, what did that feedback look like? Ask them, from their perspective, is there anything that could have been different? Maybe it was just simply the roles didn't make sense, and kind of being okay with that. And if you're working direct, same sort of thing, right? Hey, I was just wondering if I could get some feedback, where was I missing? What didn't I have? A lot of times you're going to get a response of, they decided to move forward with a candidate that aligned better. And that's okay, right? But we want to just kind of look at that, and then you can kind of look back, and sometimes it's just things didn't line up. Maybe they needed somebody that was a power hitter for a special project because the timeline's already crunched. That doesn't mean to not apply for that opportunity in the future, right? We want to still go ahead and take a stab at the next time. Let's say you're trying to get into program management and it didn't work out this time. That doesn't mean that because that interview went bad or it just didn't come to fruition that you shouldn't apply for that next program manager position. That doesn't mean that you're necessarily not qualified for that. That could just be something on their side, something that's to do with the timeline. There's so many different pieces at play. It could have been that your schedule and their schedule just wasn't lining up and it felt clunky, when they were scheduling interviews and somebody else, their interview just cascaded right through. There's a lot of different things that can cause an interview to not pull forward with a job. And the important thing to remember is there's always a number of people that are also there with you that maybe didn't get that job. So just keep moving forward and looking for what opportunities make sense and what your goals are. That's motivation.
And we've got a couple of questions here. Maybe Kyle, you can take this one. How do you follow up if a recruiter from the company called for a screening? So maybe like that, just that initial brief conversation, and you are waiting to hear if you'll be getting an interview. So what's the best way to follow up on something like that?
Yeah. So if you're working with a recruiter and you're anticipating an interview getting set up, honestly, text and email are probably the two best quick ways that you can do a follow-up with your recruiter. Just like, hey, curious what an update was. Me personally, always juggling multiple tasks, right? I'm getting a lot of different communications coming in all the time. And if I'm on a call, which a lot of times I am on a call, I can't pick up your call, but I will receive that text message, and you've created an auto reminder for me by sending me a text, because then I can look at it and go, okay, that one's done, this one's done, and let you know where the status of various things like that might be. That being said, too, do expect, especially like right now in the middle of summer, it's vacation season from Memorial Day to Labor Day. Everybody's got a whole list of vacation days. I like to turn around a response within 48 hours if I can. But if somebody's on vacation for a week, we're strapped to a week. So hopefully that kind of helps answer that question. Text and email would be the best way.
And then we just got a more of a statement, I think here. A lot of companies don't provide feedback. So that's one of the benefits of working with a recruiter, because they will get feedback and they will share that with you. So.
Yep, and I'm also going to just highlight out there too. Not all recruiters are equal. So if you've had an experience where you didn't get feedback, it could have just been, you know, not the right career path for that specific person. I don't give up on that either. We are, at least here at Impact, a boutique firm. We prioritize candidates. We will get back to you. So go ahead and reach out and do that sort of thing. But that is the beauty, like Mark said, about working with recruiters. We are your point of contact. We are the person that's advocating for you.
So how do we know if it went well?
Yeah, so signs that the interview went well. Well, if you're dancing on the way out like this guy, that's probably a pretty good sign that it went well. I don't know if he just got an offer accepted, or if he just knows what next steps are and he's feeling good. But if you're really engaged in the conversation, you can usually read that the other person's engaged in the conversation too. So like you know, if the interview is going long, and there's a little bit of a differentiator here. Sometimes interviews go long because you make it go long. You keep talking and talking and talking, kind of like I'm doing. Well, if you make the interview go long, that could be a false positive. But if it was very conversational with the person that you were chatting with, or the group of people, then that's a good sign. And then ultimately, if you guys are discussing those roles and you can kind of see them envisioning you helping them with that process, and you know, they're kind of telling you what you're going to be doing in that new role, that's definitely a positive there as well. If they're stepping outside of the office and they're grabbing somebody from a, you know, outside that's working, and they're like, you know what, let me grab so and so and bring him in here, that's a positive. If they're trying to bring more people into the conversation, they're trying to gauge other colleagues' feedback, those are all positive things. Of course, getting invited to a second interview, same sort of thing. If they're fishing for, hey, how serious are you in the job market? What does that look like? That's them asking, you know, what are their chances? So that's a positive too. And ask for references in the first interview. Definitely a positive there. Oop. Did we lose Mark? And then if your recruiter received good feedback, yep. So I like to follow up with candidates immediately after the conversation. So when you're done with your interview, I like to have them give me a call and kind of go over that. And then the next step is I go back and get the feedback the other direction, and then pass that back to the candidate as well. So that'd be a positive there as well. Invited to ask any follow-up questions if you're in the interview, and you know, and they're asking, do you have any questions for us? Again, a little bit of that's knowing that they're engaged in the interview. That can be kind of a generic part of an interview process, where they ask, do you have any questions for us? But if you can feel that engagement and that conversationalness of it, that can be a good sign as well. And then ultimately, if they're making the interviewer is making those next steps clear.
And so we're running up on 3 o'clock here almost. So if we'll go a little bit over here to make sure we're answering everybody's questions. But if you do have to jump off, we will post this recording to our website. So I'll send out a link once this is all over and it's going live. So you can catch the last part of it if you're not able to stay the whole time. And so before we take these, we do have a few questions in the chat, so maybe we can take those. And so the first one from Tammy is, what are your recommendations for multiple recruiters contacting you for seemingly the same positions? So I think what you maybe mean there, Tammy, if maybe that you have 2 recruiting firms working on the same role and they're both contacting you about it.
Yeah, so industry standard with that one is, I mean, if you're already in a working relationship, and there's a key word here, but you know who you're being presented to, then you've already got an established relationship there, and it's good to let that other recruiter know, hey, I've already got an established relationship with such and such company through my recruiter. If you don't know, there are recruiters out there that won't tell you. Sometimes it's due to confidentiality. As we all know, there's confidential positions in the job market. But sometimes also the recruiters aren't comfortable sharing where that company is in general. It should be a good step to understand where you're applying to if you can. If it's confidential, then that kind of is what it is. But if you don't know and you just think you know, I would still go ahead and apply for that job. If a recruiter contacted you and didn't tell you where you were applying, and then another recruiter contacted you and either told you or didn't tell you were applying, you don't know that they're different jobs unless you can have a conversation with them and say, here's some specific details. Here's some specific details to iron that out. So I mean, I wouldn't hold back from applying for a job unless you know with certainty that it's already one that you're applied for. If you're being represented, then you're already being represented, and that will just muddy up the waters for you. Wouldn't try to get multiple people to represent you at the same company.
I'll also add that that's a great problem to have. So it sounds like you've got a resume that matches a lot of skills on a job ad. So I think that's a good problem to have, and then just open communication with all parties, right? So
yes, please send us your resume.
yes.
And then another question from Adam was, how do you follow up with a recruiter after a company interview that you are extremely motivated for, but without sounding desperate?
So following up with the recruiter, even if you're desperate, they're your advocate. So you can be desperate if you want to be. Just touching base again. Best thing to do is just send a text message. Another thing too is if you are working with a recruiter and you are very anxious, we can kind of help you temper those nerves and understand what next steps look like and what this flow looks like. This is our day-to-day. We do this every day with hundreds of people. So we understand what that flow looks like. We also understand what the anxiety looks like. So just reach out to your recruiter. Hopefully that's us. Let us know what you're feeling and what your thoughts are.
Yep. And then Stephen asks about texting. He says, is uncomfortable with texting. Is it difficult to steer toward my communicative strengths? And how firm can I make my preferences?
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, if you're not comfortable with texting, and I suppose with that, I mean, leave a call, leave a voicemail if that's something that you're comfortable with. If it's not texting and you're okay with emails, then do that. And I would just communicate all those different things up front with your recruiter so they know what to expect. A lot of communication, what makes communication good is just having open communication, right? Letting them know, hey, I am not comfortable texting, and whatever those reasons are, let them know that that's not where you're comfortable, and how to best communicate with you so they have an idea. If I'm working with you and you tell me that you're not comfortable texting, I've got you in my phone. If I see your name pop up, then I know I just need to get a call back out to you. It's just, from my standpoint, texting for me is an automatic reminder that you've created, and it's very effective, but a missed call can be just as effective, but ultimately communicating those preferences up front and just having a conversation about it.
And Dennis is saying that when it happened to him, he asked a second recruiter if this is for the role for company name ABC, whatever it is. And if so, I've already been submitted for it, but if not, I'm interested. So basically let the second recruiter know that you've been submitted to the company and they can confirm if that's what it is. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yep.
That's a perfect a way to approach that, Dennis.
Yep. And then we have these are the questions on here. If you want to go through them here, that people ask during sign-up process. So if whoever's still on here, if your question is on here, feel free to chime in too as we're going through them.
Yeah, so I would say so for the top two to me are a little bit similar, and it's I read this as how do I tell my story, right? How do I like how do you tell a solid story, and then the other one is tell me about yourself, or so I actually have I've had a job since I was 14 years old, and I haven't stopped working since. And I have a resume that does not belong on any job board ever. It is actually just like a running document of all of my achievements, if you will, right, throughout various different roles I've had. And then if I actually need to use it for something, I can take it, tailor it down, make it match a job, and then I can create my own story about why am I a good fit. And then I have all of that proof in my running document of all of the times I've had some successes. So I think practicing your story is the most important thing you can do. The tell me about yourself question, it seems like a loaded question, right? There's so many ways to answer that, but ultimately what the company is trying to find is what type of worker are you? What type of attitude do you have? What type of skills and development can you bring to the company? Like, how can you help the company? So my recommendation for those types of storytelling is create a story about yourself, about how you have helped move a needle somewhere, right? How have you impacted work in a previous environment? And it doesn't necessarily have to be translatable to the current role that you're going for. If it is, all the better. But basically just being able to tell your story about how you're helping an organization grow and meet their objectives is what I feel like those are looking for. I don't know, Kyle, if you have a different
No,
thought process.
I think that's great, and I'm just gonna kind of add a little bit of a thought into that. Giving a full response includes several different parts. What your role was, what your responsibility was, what the task was. And she mentioned moving a needle. Those are like the best things to put on resumes is actions and results, right? I did this, it generated or did this, right? What are actions and what are results? And the same thing comes through in answers, right? This was my job. This was the task. This is how we did it. This was the result, giving that full spectrum view of that answer. So I've got all those different pieces. You could tell them everything, but if they don't know what your job title was or what your function was, it could be construed in a lot of different ways. So you want to just make sure that you're letting them know, what basically what your title is, what the task was, how you accomplished that, and what the result was. So.
Yeah.
And
All
then
right. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, how do you approach having a lack of tenure after a career change when applying for a job?
I will say, from a Monster perspective, this is probably more common than people realize, and I think there's probably fear and anxiety around making a career change. But there are full recruitment strategies that I have seen other companies deploy to try to get people to change industry, to change careers, and to move into new roles. So if you don't have a lot of experience in a specific area, it may not be a problem as long as you have some of those underlying skills that they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So I see this a lot. I see career changers all the time. I don't know about you guys.
Yeah, and I guess I also look at, I don't know if the question here could also be, just maybe along the same career path, but they made a career change because it may be a bad fit, and something like that. And ultimately, the thing that we want to avoid in our career path is having multiple bad fits after another, because then the question starts to become, is it the companies or is it you? And you want to kind of avoid that. So trying to, if you're trying to grow your job or your career, and you run into, one bad fit, two bad fits, those are hurdles you can jump over. If you successfully have a lot of bad fits, then you got to maybe just hang up for a minute and try to develop yourself to find a way to help this company and yourself move forward in a direction so that you can maybe build what's missing. I'm not necessarily saying that there's something always there. There are certainly scenarios where luck has its way, but ultimately, if you're having a difficult time finding a good fit, maybe it's more about that interview process then, and having those questions prepared that matter to you, so that you can ask those different questions that apply to that.
Yep. And then the next question is about remote jobs, and I can actually start on this one. So after applying for several remote jobs without success, how can I adjust my resume to be more successful? So I part of what I do is I take care of the job postings. So Amanda could probably talk about this as well. When we post a typical job post versus a remote job, we'll easily get 10 times as many resumes for the remote job. So you're automatically just competing with a lot more people right off the bat if it's a fully remote. So you definitely want to make sure that your resume really speaks to the job role, because we get a lot of applicants that are just putting stuff out there and hoping they'll get something. So there's a lot of resumes that have nothing to do with the job. So so Amanda, maybe you can talk a little bit about that as far as remote versus regular jobs.
Yes, yep. So I'll agree with that. So I think with a remote job, and if you're joining a net new company in a remote role, there is an expectation amongst many employers that you're going to be, whereas if you're in a hybrid role or you're able to get to an office, maybe they'll accept a candidate who's only about like a 60% match, right? But when you're going for a remote role where you're going to be on your own and responsible for your own time, they really want somebody who's a very, very close fit with a lot of the skills. So just making sure that when you're applying to that role, that in your resume you might read that job and think, hey, I'm a great fit. So my question in return is, did you take the time to tailor your resume to highlight all the ways in which you match that job description? And it takes a little bit more, but you really just have to be a closer fit, because to Mark's point, you're not wrong. Everybody wants remote work, and they do get a higher amount of applications. So just make sure that when you're applying for those, you're a really good fit. I don't know if that's a good answer or not, but I think it's an honest one.
Yep. And then it's been more than 14 years since I had gone on a job interview and had pretty much no idea how to handle one. How do I prepare?
So
Get a recruiter.
Yeah. Yeah. Call Impact and have them walk you through it. But I hope everyone learned something along the way on how to prepare. So, but I think the call the recruiter one is a great answer.
Yep. And then I get really nervous during the interview. It's like I freeze up, like stage fright. I've never really had to do an interview. I always got the job right then and there. So I think part of it is what we talked about earlier, is just prepare. So if you're doing it from home or however you're doing the interview, just prepare a lot to feel comfortable. And I know, Kyle, you talked to a lot of candidates, so maybe you come across this and have some advice.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it's just shake it off. If you've got something, you just got to just shake it off and just, put it back there. I don't know how to explain that without making all these body motions, but you got to just get it behind you and just like go into it. It's a conversation. Remind yourself that it's a conversation. This whole thing started with a 2D piece of paper that was your background, and that background generated interest because you've got skills. You've got skills that they need, and they ultimately have an interest in talking you to the point that you are now either on the phone with them or you are in person with them. And regardless of what that is, there's interest there. And so they just want to have a conversation with you. Remind yourself that an interview is really just a conversation of how I can help, how I can apply myself to this position, and shake it off.
And then I'll add practice, right? So there's an article out on monster.com. It's called 100 interview questions. You can read through them and practice your answer to them. I think practice makes perfect. And if you have a talk track in mind, and you know, like if you know, okay, here are the 5 key points that I want to walk away with them learning about me, you're gonna go in a little more confident. Confident is the word I was looking to say. And prepared, right? And a little more at ease with yourself, knowing that you've got the skills and you can explain, you know, how they fit the role. So I think just practice. That's what I would say.
And I love the comfortable and confident word you made up there.
You like it? It was
Yeah.
it was a hybrid word. It was well done.
Yep. And then the next question is, I've always felt extremely awkward asking for the job at the end of the interview, and thoughts on best practices. So I think this goes back a little bit to we were talking about follow-ups, and something simple like asking, you know, what are the next steps, and when do you anticipate that I might hear back from you? So that could be a simple way to do it. Kyle, Amanda, do you have any
I
thoughts on
mean,
it?
I don't necessarily know that you approach it by saying, "Can I have the job?" You approach it by saying, you know, what do next steps look like from your perspective, you know, and they're going to open up with you, you know, whether that's, you know, a lot of times employers have engaged 5 to 6 people. Well, they've got a responsibility to those 5 to 6 people because they've scheduled interviews. So, you know, you can't just necessarily ask for the job, but you can ask them, you know, what do next steps look like from your perspective? And they're going to tell you, you know, I've got, you know, either a vacation in between, I've got a candidate that I'm going to be interviewing with tomorrow, this or that, or, you know, we'd like to have you on site. But ultimately you're just asking, what's the next step? You know, because the employer is the one that has the job. They own the process behind this, and you just have to ask them, you know, what does the next step look like? And that does 2 things. It lets them know that you're interested, and it gets you moving forward.
And then, so Kyle, what about asking timeframes? Do you think that's appropriate or inappropriate? Like, what are the next steps, and you know, when do you think you'll be making a decision, or is that too aggressive?
I think that is appropriate. I mean, everybody here has goals in mind. There are, and some of it's situational too on its appropriateness, but a lot of people are already engaged in the job and interview process. So not only is it appropriate, but you also can then you know, parlay that with informing them, hey, I'm in process with a few other things. I'm really interested in this opportunity, and I'd like to be able to evaluate it in a time frame that makes sense.
Right. And then the only other thing I'll add here is when I see the ask for the job, I think there are specific rules where you do have to close the interview, right? If it's a sales opportunity, for example, the expectation is a little bit different where you do have to get the next meeting, but not, I would say generally speaking, just finding out the next steps is really all you need to do.
And that's a good point too, right? If you're in sales, you do need to be able to close a deal, and so they'll be looking for that, and that's, every job is going to have its own intricacies.
Yeah, but I would say generally speaking, I think that's the ask for the job thing. It looks more like a sales. It reads salesy to me. That's all.
Yep. And oops. Let's see. So I think the next question is referring to, is there ever too much talking from the person that's being interviewed? So I think it kind of goes to oversharing maybe, or talking about things that aren't relevant that some people tend to do in an interview possibly. So what are your guys' thoughts on that?
So read the scene. If you're in a tier 1 automotive facility and you can tell they're really busy, they might not have time. Not that they don't want to make time, but they just might not have time for idle chatter. You know, they may have to get through to the next thing. They may be having a press scheduled meeting coming up right after that. Maybe they squeezed you in. So you do want to be mindful of other people's time too. You know, try to read that scene, try to understand, do they look like, if they're giving you signs and signals that they're ready for the interview to be done, we maybe already talked too much. We want to try to see where they're at in the interview process too, and that's where it becomes conversational, right? So just kind of trying to be there with the conversation. If you've already asked what next steps look like, and they've given you an answer there. They've given you an answer. Okay, I'll look forward to next steps, and kind of moving on from that.
And I think it's about keeping the conversation focused on what's important for the interview and not start talking about other stuff that's going to derail the whole conversation into something that's not really going to move the interview forward and to where you need it to be.
And then I'll add, just make sure that you take the time to listen, right? Sometimes questions come anecdotally. So just make sure that you're listening to what they're saying and giving them an opportunity to respond.
Yep. And then how do you sound confident when asked an unexpected question? So for example, an interviewer asked, what does quality mean to you?
Well, so my background's actually I was a quality engineer before this, so it's a great question, and I think it's fine to just have a kind of a natural approach to it. Oh, that's a great question. Just show your emotions there. If you didn't expect it, just try to find a direction to that. You say, oh, that's a good question. Let me think about that real quick, and try to guide yourself to it. Don't get distracted by being in an unexpected scenario. The question's pretty simple. What does quality mean to you? Ultimately, if they ask you a question that you don't know, the best answer is to let them know that you don't know, or what do you mean? Sometimes they can even give you a little bit of the keys to the castle by just asking them, what do you mean by that? So.
Yeah, I agree. Just if you're not sure, it's not, I think it's okay to ask clarifying questions, right? You can ask, I guess it depends what type of interview you're in for quality, but do you mean quality in this way or in that way, right? You might have to just have them guide you a little bit if you really don't know the answer. And I think that's okay, as long as, to the earlier point, that it's still a conversational type of interview.
And then the final question that was submitted ahead of time, and then we'll get into more open Q&A for the last segment. But how do I answer a situational question properly? I work on manufacturing program management. So situational question being something along the lines of, how do I handle this particular situation if it comes up, or something that the employer might say, if this were to happen, how would you handle it?
Yeah, and I think that comes back to kind of the beginning here, what your story is, and that's if you're asked a situational question, okay, what was your job? Were you a supervisor? What are your responsibilities? What was the action and that result? We want to have that full-bodied response of painting that picture, and giving them that, and then also making sure that you do address that question head on if possible, right? We don't want to, if we don't have a good answer for that, then that's where that clarifying question comes in play, to kind of get some clarity on what they're asking for, and ultimately just giving that full-bodied response. This is what I was responsible for. This was the action. This was my role, and here's the result.
Yeah, I think it's one of those questions that you'll have to paint a story by drawing upon your past experience.
Yep. And so we have a few questions in the chat, so I'll do those first and then we'll open it up. So Stephen is wondering about behavioral interview questions. So how do you handle those, or what could you expect in an interview for behavioral interview questions, and how would you prepare for them?
Oh, my favorite one is, name a time you made a mistake. That one's a good one, and you actually have to like paint a picture where you've done something negative or something that you didn't intend to do, but it goes back to outcomes and how did you handle it and how did you learn from it. So if you're going to get some of those questions that might come across negative, you just want to circle it back to resolution and outcomes. So
yep.
Yeah, and in those situations too where there's negatives involved, I like to say, be brief, be bright, be gone. Don't overshare, and try to pivot positive. We want to focus on you know, what our positives are. So, you know, kind of following up with what that result was and bringing it to conclusion.
Yep. And then we have more of a resume question from Tammy. What are acceptable explanations for work gaps on your resume precisely during the COVID lockdown?
So, I mean, that's a kind of very situational thing. I'd really have to kind of talk with you on what that looked like and see it from your response. But I mean, ultimately, whatever you experienced is what you experienced, right? Whether it was getting COVID and you were hospitalized, or you know, if there was fear involved in that. I mean, it was uncharted territory for the entire world. Nobody knew what to expect. You know, if those work gaps go from 2020 and they go 2 or 3 years out and we didn't have a job in between there, then sometimes you're kind of reigniting your career. You've got that experience out there, but you maybe have to dial back a little bit and say, you know, I haven't ridden a bike in 3 years. I know I can do it, but I need to be able to communicate that with somebody, and maybe set your expectations a little bit lower, versus, you know, if you've got a few gaps that are a few months long, for various family things or anything like that. I mean, I see it even outside of COVID with like, death in the family, right? People experience death in the family, or they've had a loved one that they've got to take care of. That's your story. It's your story. Sometimes it is a little bit of a hard hurdle to get over, you know, when you're competing with people that don't have that in their story, but you've got to put your best foot forward and carry what you have.
Yep.
And I'll add that I think your resume needs to be like an accurate reflection of your work history, right? So then you're really going to have to interview through those situations.
Yep. And then we're open for questions, so feel free to unmute, and if you have any questions at all, we'll be happy to take them.
I know you've covered this a little bit, you know, as far as loosening up when answering questions, but years ago, I was given some advice. I was basically told I was a little too encyclopedic in the way I handled questions, and was given the advice that just about every question should be an invitation to tell a story, not to provide information. And I'm wondering, do you have any opinions on that? What are anything?
I mean, I feel like if that's kind of your personality, a lot of things are, you know, and I don't know if they're trying to say it comes off as shocking that you have such a kind of encyclopedic response where it's almost, I don't know if robotic is what you mean or what that's coming across as. But sometimes just saying, you know, I'm kind of a dictionary on these things, and giving somebody a little bit of a break into that, an icebreaker, if you will, if that seems to be something, you know, I think it's okay to have your personality and carry it with you as a strength. And ultimately that's what you're going to have to do in your role. So you need to present that with your best foot forward. If you consistently get some sort of feedback, whatever that is, doesn't really matter. Whatever that feedback is, if you've identified that that's part of your personality and that's part of, you know, either your core or anything like that, then you got to figure out how to carry that forward. I don't know if that helps. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that helps a bit. I hadn't really that wasn't the original takeaway that I had. That's a good added perspective on it. I just I guess I've assumed when I talk to somebody about you know, when I get some advice, I forget that advice has different facets and perspectives. So
yeah,
the more he practices, it'll be better.
Yeah, as Don and Amanda have both put, practice makes perfect too. You know, sometimes you know, I don't know if and I'm going to read into this just a little bit, not saying that this is even the direction, but let's say that somebody's saying that maybe you're coming across as a know-it-all. Even just prefacing it is like, I tend to come across as a know-it-all, and that's just because I really love information. You know, even if there are some gaps in there, and it's just kind of a passion of my information, you know, trying to give a little bit more body to why you are the way you are, why you operate the way you operate, so that people can see how your personality can fit, and giving some body to that, if that makes sense. And then also balancing that with, it needs to be conversational. So if you're in you're in an interview with somebody, you don't necessarily have to have an answer to everything. Trying to make sure that they get that room to talk. And I'm just reading into what the different perspectives could have been behind that feedback. I'm just kind of pulling straws here.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Was helpful.
Absolutely.
Yep. And then we have a question from Mike in the chat here. Do I put the gaps in my resume? I have heard conflicting information regarding it. Like you should put it for more than 6 months. I wasn't getting much interest from employers when I did that earlier this year.
I guess when you say, should I put the gaps in my resume? Whatever date you worked in a position to whenever you ended that position, those are what should be on your resume. You don't have to put like in between there, like gap. You don't have to spell that out for anybody. I wouldn't do that, because then that could be misconstrued visually as another job opportunity or something like that. What I would do is make sure that your dates are accurate. Also, if and when employers do a background check, a lot of those things will pop up on there anyways. Last thing we want to do is get to the final rounds, waste some time and embarrass some people. We should be reflecting exactly what we've done, putting our best foot forward with that. 6 months isn't something that's unmanageable, even if it's 6 months recently. Those are definitely things that can be reflected on and carried through. A lot of it depends on your perspective, and your intention.
All right. Any other questions out there for us? So if we don't have any other questions, I'll say for those of you who are not working with us already, or if you'd like to see the kind of jobs that we have available and connect with Kyle or one of our recruiters, please go to our website, impactbusinessgroup.com. We have all of our jobs on there, and you can connect with us, upload your resume, and kind of move from there. And then, Amanda, what's the best way to connect with Monster and get started on job search with all of your job postings?
Yeah, if you go right to monster.com, that gets you started. My recommendation is actually to click the career advice option at the top, and there's a page for interviewing specifically with a lot of content. I will say in 2021, Monster redid the entire candidate experience, refreshed all of the content. There's salary information, there's interview information, there's resume help, there's cover letter help. So don't be afraid to use all of those resources. They're free and available to you. And then I'll also add that Impact Business can also help you guys, right? So reach out to one of the recruiters and they can help you with all of those tasks as well, right? Whether it's polishing up a resume or getting ready for an interview. They have a team of recruiters who are ready to help.
Yep. And thanks for everyone for staying. We went a little over what we were anticipating, but
yeah, ask real quick. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
oh, go ahead. Yes, please.
Do you have planned any future, maybe sort of drill down sessions on the different? I mean, every subtopic that we covered could have its own meeting, and especially the one that interests me is the behavioral questions and situational questions. How to handle those. I think that would make a great drill down.
Can I pop something into a chat? Will it let me do that?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to put a link in here if I can navigate. Bear with me for a moment. But there's a whole page right here. This one's a bit much, but in there's an entire section about behavioral questions, and it will let you read them and it will give you suggestions for how to answer them. And then basically all you'll have to do is tailor it to your own personal story. So that's an article I recommend.
Well, thank you. You're putting it in the chat?
Yes. Did it go to everybody? Did I do it right?
I think it came just to me, actually.
Oh, okay. Can you reshare it, or is there a way I can change it?
Yep. No, I'll share it with everybody
Thank
here.
you.
Let's see. there, everybody should see it now, hopefully.
Thank
Got
you
it.
so much.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
yep, we
Thank
did
you
record.
all.
Yep, we did record the session, so it'll be up on our website. So if you want to go back and review anything, feel free to do so. And if you have any other questions at all, just feel free to reach out. And thanks again for attending. Appreciate it.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Have a
and
great day.
Just
Thank
so
you,
everybody
guys.
knows, Impact does a great job. You have other videos out there that people can look at.
Yeah, we do have some previous webinars that are recorded on interviewing and some other things. So, and I know we'll do some more webinars. So we'll keep you all up to date on that.
Job well done,
I-
you guys. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you,
Yeah,
everybody.
absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.